things feel safe and comfortable. It's like a green zone, and then your yellow zone is where like, ooh, this is kind of sticky, and then the red zone is where like danger and sometimes trauma and pain happen. But if we can sit in this yellow zone for a bit longer and even push into this like red zone of that's where growth happens, that's where change and transformation happens.
Welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Spandiari, and today I have with me Shelby Terrell.
Yes.
Yeah, welcome to the show, first of
Thank
all.
you for having me. I'm so stoked to be here.
We were just giggling because we have an instant connection. This is our first meeting or seeing of each other. And I was just giggling because how do I even introduce you? You are so multidimensional. You were up to so many incredible things. As a queer, polyamorous, kinky woman living in New York City, I'm looking at you would never know that you come from a Mormon background, which you just shared with me.
Yeah.
And, you're currently in school studying to be a future sex and relationship therapist. You were also getting, certifications and studying psychedelic assisted therapy. And we just got to talking about the program that you're in to, support on set, I'm guessing, for film and television to revolutionize intimate scenes in that industry. And we already started talking about the porn industry, which I'm just like, okay, where do we go? We have so much to cover. And I already know you'll be back.
Yes. I hope so. Can't wait.
Let's dive right in with the time that we have today.
Yeah.
And I think let's go right for the meaty stuff.
Okay.
You are currently
which kind of meat you want to go for?
So much. Pun intended. When you're polyamorous.
Love it. Yeah,
okay.
right?
So I'm super curious about the film and television industry. As a former actor, dancer myself, never could really check the model box because most people listening to the show don't know I'm 4'11". Says 5 foot on my. No one knows. When people meet me in person, they're like, "You're so small." And I think I just present taller online. Who knows? Anyway, when you said that,
You
it
have a
really.
commanding voice, commanding
Thank
presence.
you. Yeah, I'll
Love
take
it.
it. Coming from the similar background, I didn't stay in film and television for very long. I realized early on I did not love the business of it. I love the art of it. So I, put that to bed early on in my life. But I know the what everyone perceives as sex, as romance, as intimacy is very much just a reflection of what we see in media and entertainment. And I had no idea that this was a thing that people were going to start to revolutionize. And it's something that's so needed because, from my perspective, right, we see so much writing from the male gaze with, men dominating the writing field and dominating directing and just like people on set in general. I want to turn this over to you and let you share with me why you were interested in this. I mean, I have my own ideas and what you're learning and what you see possible. Well, that's 3 questions in one. Let's start with what had you want to pursue this?
Yeah, I grew up dancing. I always knew that I wanted to be a performer. In all of my therapy, I realized that I like being on stage because it's my need to be seen. And I can get into that at another time. But love performance and artistry that comes with all of that. And so I did my undergrad in modern dance and then immediately was hired by a dance company in New York City. And I was very fortunate to study and perform with around the world and with many different companies and dance acted modeled for a lot of like the initial time of my early 20s and my time in New York. And then I, kind of started to feel a little jaded. It was all like jaded with the industry as a whole and wanted to kind of transition into something else. So I dabbled in advertising. I was like, let's go it all the way to the extreme end of like not wearing shoes ever to having a desk and having to, it was just like a very bizarre change of scene. And then COVID hit and during all this time, I was also, um, my ex partner and I, we were both identified as queer and we're exploring an open relationship. And so, and I was working a lot on some sexual and religious trauma that I carry from growing up Mormon and all of these things. And so I was doing a lot of reading and listening to podcasts and research and connecting with communities um, around that. And then my sister, one of my younger sisters, came out to me as gay, and I was like, "Oh my god, I've got this. We can do this." And then I was like, "What am I like? I'm so passionate about this." And so then, and I have the resources, and where like fuck, I could have used a person like this when I was coming out and doing all these things. And so I started to switch course. I quit my job, got divorced, went back to grad school to be a sex and relationship therapist. And around the same time, one of my best friends, who is a screenwriter in LA, was like, "Have you heard of this intimacy coordinator position?" And I was like, "No, but I really like intimacy. What does this mean?" And explained to me that since the Me Too movement, there has been this new role on set that is essentially you're an advocate for the actors and act as a liaison between the actors and directors and producers around consent and boundaries and how simulated sex is approached on set, perceived, making sure that pleasure is represented accurately, that folks who are queer, trans, non-binary, like everyone is respected on set, and that in the middle of a scene, if the actor or director is like, "Fuck it, I need you to like, you know, it needs to be more real, more passionate, touch her here," then the intimacy coordinator, me, is there to be like, "I'm sorry, this is outside of the boundaries. Is this necessary to tell the story?" Like all of these things
Mm,
to make sure that that a everyone is protected, and b that there's accountability there. And I think that accountability was a big part of that Me Too movement, and just making sure that we're transforming sex education and how we perceive sex from the inside out. Because part of my like it is also the perfect marriage, I think, with my background in performance and then my passion for sex education and then my mental health certification. So yeah.
it fits. It fits. I love it. Gives us a lot of perspective to how you got here and your evolution and your why. And I love that you shared the story of like the coming out of your little sister because it's usually like somebody that we care deeply about to show us our capabilities as well. The people that like really matter to us in our lives will a lot of times help us shift the way that we live our lives or the way that
Yeah.
we engage, in our careers.
Yeah.
And I think that's also really cool, just that you have that
Yeah.
closeness.
I'm Yeah, absolutely. Because it's something that, I think I also don't think that I would have been able to do any of this work any earlier in my life. I needed every single experience to get me to a learn what my needs and wants are. Like, and it's easier to advocate for others and help others more than it is to help and advocate for ourselves. Like me setting boundaries is much more difficult than enforcing boundaries for other people. And so
Mm,
I've learned and had to learn and continue to learn how to advocate for myself and set my boundaries. And so it's kind of that balance too of recognizing that I needed to perform, I needed to go into advertising, I needed to open my marriage and succeed and fail, and I needed to do all of these things. And then in order to pull it out of myself, I needed my sister to be like, "Help me."
right. Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. It's usually, yeah, that's, we help ourselves last, but eventually when we get to it, we're like, oh, this has all been informed by what I've done, with and for other people. So, okay, so do you apply for this position first and you get this job?
Yeah, so now there are uh when I decided I wanted to do this, I did a lot of research on different organizations who were doing the training, and everyone, it's still such a new thing that timelines and approaches and tuition fees and um, the everyone's still trying to figure that out and what curriculum looks like.
Okay.
And so I did a lot of initial research, and I ended up deciding to go through this one particular company that I'm happy to provide the link for. It's IDC, for intimacy directors and coordinators. And intimacy directors are for theater, and intimacy coordinators are for film. And so already that's a distinction made as far as what course you go into. And I made the decision to do film because I have more friends in film.
Mhm.
To be honest, it's more lucrative. Um,
Yeah.
I think that theater, living in New York especially, would be amazing and fun. And it's different tools, right? Like, how do you mask certain scenes, and how do you, like, for TV, you can film something multiple times, but in theater, you it's a one shot deal when you're
Yeah.
performing, and you can use a scrim or the lighting, and then in film there's certain camera angles you can use, and so there is a lot of overlap, but there's definitely some specific skills you need for each one. But for this particular program that I'm in, they offer a lot of community courses, and they offer a lot of free information sessions, free or low cost information sessions about what the courses are, and they offer different levels of certification. One of them is a consent forward artist, which is a much shorter period of time, but it really focuses on consent and how to, again, advocate for yourself and others in that context. And then there's some specific ones on working with neurodiverse populations and consent and things like that. And then there's a level one, level two, level three, and level four in order to get your pathway to certification. Level one and level two is open to anyone. You have to apply for, and I think level one, when I did it, was 4 weeks long. Level two is 6 weeks long, and it's like a day a week for 3 or 4 hours a day. So it's like,
Okay. Is it on, and it's
and the
online
online,
or but
and
live, like in a
yes,
Zoom
yeah,
okay.
you can't,
Are there
yeah, you can't like,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say,
And
well,
then,
yeah, you can't do it at your own pace. You have to like show up for
right,
the course.
yeah, there's a lot of people, and there's enough interest and enough people where when I was waiting, I was on a wait list for, like, I don't know, almost a year. But now they're offering them more frequently, and so people are starting to engage, and the ability to take the course, like levels one and two, much more often. They're offered much more frequently, so people can kind of get a taste for it. But level three is a fairly intensive application process because um, it's a fairly intensive application process, and then it is 10 weeks long. There's 10 online sessions and then 3 in-person weekends here in New York. And my cohort is about 18 people. Half of us are US based, the other half are international. And so that's also been really amazing to get different experiences and ideas and cultural context for sex, language, uh, industry. It's
Yeah,
been
I
very amazing.
imagine. I'm so curious. Is it gender diverse? Or is it
Primarily, folks who identify as female.
mhm. I had a
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah,
That's
well,
like one of the
it's
first things
interesting
I
too.
thought of.
We had a lot of conversations around it. It's also the similar thing for social workers. It's because I'm a MSW candidate right now, and so um, both fields are very uh, female driven, I would say, and I gendered terms. But it's really interesting because the word intimacy generally has a connotation that either attracts or doesn't certain populations, and I think that that's
Yeah.
really interesting. We were actually talking about that. My cohort and I, we were out to lunch, and um, recognizing the vast gender distance. But one of my teachers, though, he is identifies as male, and there's such a need for both or for all genders in that space because some people are more comfortable being nude or naked or talking about consent and boundaries with someone who may be similar or dissimilar to their identity. So,
Yeah, there's so much to learn. So have you gotten to put these skills to use in like on set? What has that been
that
like?
that's coming. I'm very
Okay.
excited for it. There's a lot of, and I'm in the conversation with a couple people who have like small indie projects going on around the city, but there are some, because my program and intimacy coordinators are becoming required by SAG-AFTRA, like the union, to be on set. For example, HBO is requiring intimacy coordinators on every set now, but that's not the same for every network. Certain actors are requiring it in order for them to sign on to a movie. Certain directors are bringing their own. It's becoming more and more of a thing, and so we'll only see more of it, which is amazing. Because it's not only around sex and sexuality, but it's advocating for marginalized groups. Because when you talk about consent, it's about having agency over your body, and having agency over your body is something that was stripped from us from like a colonial perspective. And so when we talk about consent, we're really talking about restorative justice and advocating for like, a more liberation based approach to how we engage with each other. And so it is a SAG-AFTRA based thing, and there are legal requirements around it. Like there have to be certain things have to be written into contracts, and there needs to be a certain amount of time. And so, in order for me to, I'm still learning all of that right now. We're still in like the soft skills phase.
Yeah. This is
um,
great though.
but yeah, I'm really excited, and I was sitting in class. We had our first in person weekend last weekend actually, and it was. I've been with these people in an online forum for months and months, like doing level 1 and level 2, and then starting our level 3. And physically being together, sharing space was really wonderful. And then, but I felt such a sense of grounding. I think there's been a lot of anticipation for how I'm going to, I have so many things up in the air, therapy, and then specializing in sex and relationships and kink, and working with the LGBTQIA plus community, and then psychedelics, and then intimacy, and like I have all of these parts and things that I'm super passionate about and how to marry them. But when I was sitting in this course, I was like, you know what, this, like I am exactly where I'm meant to be. And it feels so good knowing that like all of my experiences, it's kind of what you were pointing to earlier, is like all of my experiences have led me here to this moment, and I am much more capable than I realized and everything else. And I feel really supported and seen in the space, and they're just giving me more tools for my toolkit. And so I'm really excited as to how I can both help and shape sex and pleasure and like be a advocate for pleasure and sex education from the outside and from the inside, if
Yes.
that makes sense.
That's the makes so much sense. Just hearing you talk, I hear and see so much of myself in you, and you are just in your learning phase. Like it sounds
Yeah.
like you love to learn too, and
Oh my God, I
I
love it.
share that. It's I love
Yeah.
I just like devour new information. And there's this oh, I forget what it's called, but it's like a personality test you can take that's
Hmm.
self-reporting, and it has like 24 personality characteristics. It's very different than like,
It's not the Myers Briggs, right?
no, it's not the Myers-Briggs, and it's very different. I'll have to link it in the
Oh,
show notes. I forget
I
what
would
it's
love
called.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's essentially like everyone has a mix of these traits. There are 24 like major traits of human nature. And it's really cool because it gives you a very different perspective than like the Myers-Briggs or some of these more classic and widely used tools.
Yeah.
And the love of learning is one of the attributes, the
Yeah.
characteristics of personality. And it came out as number one for me years ago.
Oh, amazing.
And it's so interesting because my husband still laughs about this, but love, like the need for love, was like number 23, like polyamorous person.
Wow.
Yeah, but it
So
was also, I took
interesting.
it at a time in my life when I was learning a ton of things, and I was sort of gathering all of my tools. I was in that
Right.
chapter, that season of my life where I was hungry for knowledge, and it was, you
Yeah.
know, mentoring under people, for psychedelic journeys and
Yeah.
training to use sound, and also like getting a coaching certification after I had already, been
Yeah.
coaching for years and
Yeah.
working in big group environments. But it was like, okay, let me hone my skills. I did like a course at Cornell for, wellness counseling. It was just like I was doing everything I
Mhm.
could. And
Yeah.
in some ways I used to judge myself back then for being really scattered. And
Mm.
sometimes I would have to catch myself. And I love what you shared about feeling grounded in that moment of being out with your cohort,
Yeah.
because little moments like that, where you're in that place of deep self acceptance, make such a difference in your journey. Because it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is like exactly where I'm supposed to be. And it's not about what I'm going to do with this
Yeah.
stuff, because that's the how and that works itself out. It's like right now is the why. I'm doing this because I love it and I can. And the universe is like giving me all these opportunities and these invitations to like study. And I think that's amazing
Thank you.
because
And thank you for sharing that with me, like your journey and that.
yeah,
I
I
really
remember at
appreciate
one point I was like, what am I doing? Do I lead women's retreats or ceremonies or yoga? Do I do another teacher training? Am I supposed to be in Peru doing this dieta right now? Like what?
that. Yeah.
My
Amazing.
where is my life? And it was like, oh, but my life is everywhere. I'm in like my
Yeah.
web phase. I've like,
Yeah.
weaved this web and I'm collecting everything I
Yeah.
can. Sometimes I like to see myself as a spider.
Oh,
And I think
love.
that's really cool. Yeah, that's where you are too, it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I was saying to someone, um, I'm both thrilled I'm in my last semester of my master's program, and I'm so sad because I get into this zone where I have so much going on, and I'm at an internship, and I see my patients, and I love that work so much. And then I have my freelance jobs at school, and then this program, and I thrive in this. I thrive in the chaos, and so
yeah.
I don't mind that I'm up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday doing homework because I'm reading about really fucking cool shit.
Yeah. Wait, what are your astrological signs? Do you know?
I'm Sagittarius, but I don't know what time I was born, so I don't know the rest. But
My husband doesn't either.
I feel
It's
like I'm
funny.
a Sag through and through.
Yeah. You sound like one. Mhm.
Thank you.
Um,
What are you?
I'm an Aquarius
Okay.
rising, or sorry, I'm an Aquarius sun sign, a Scorpio
Mhm.
rising, and I have a Leo moon. So
Okay.
a lot of big signs, a lot of big
Yeah.
energy.
That's you commanding the room.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of chat because there's so many, I feel like, ways that we can take this conversation. And for the sake of, I think, finding the intersections in your work and, current and future like studies and careers, how are you finding um well, okay, I want to say that, and I forgot to even say this early on, but the reason I found you is because I saw online, I must have been looking at something for Hinge, and I like to celebrate Hinge because they have opened up their app to include non-monogamy as an interest, desire, orientation. I actually need to get on there and like check it out and what they do. And if anyone from Hinge is listening, I want to have you on the show. So, um,
I have
but
some connections.
oh,
I can get
perfect.
you.
Yes. I
Yeah.
would love to, yeah, chat them up and celebrate that because it's a really big step. And so Hinge has named you one of their, look, it's a small group of mental health advocates of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about that and then kind of find how your interest and training in mental health sort of
Mhm.
intersects with what you see and what you're starting to learn now about like the I love that you're in New York City. I'm
I
from
know. I
Philly,
was
so
like,
I miss the loud traffic. I don't hear that. No. Well, I live in a very residential neighborhood in LA, but being from a big city like that. Um, my editor probably edited out the large horn that everyone's like, what is she talking about? Leave that in
yeah,
there.
probably.
Leave the horn. Um,
Some
but so
soundscapes.
yeah, so how did you how did you get this nomination? First of all,
Yeah.
how did they find you?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this earlier. Last year, I was doing a lot of research around decolonizing sex education in America and what that would look like. And it was a lot of research on what sex ed looks like in America and then around the world. And then I did a survey with about 200 people. I put it out on my Instagram, and I was only expecting like between 50 and 100, and left it up. I was going to leave it up for 2 weeks, and then within 3 days, I had 200 people respond, and it was on how they learned about sex, and was it in school or church or online and porn, like whatever. And everyone was so generous with what they learned, and it was amazing. And so I shared that online, and then was approached by two wonderful women, Molly and Alyssa from the SOS Pod, and they interviewed me about sex education in America. And then one someone heard it and then emailed me and was like, Hinge just put out this scholarship for mental health advocates who are in school planning to work with the queer community. And I was like, oh my God. And so I immediately felt this similar grounding feeling. I was like, that's me. Like I see myself in what they're looking for. And so I was actually on a flight to Mexico to meet my best friend to like go celebrate the end of my first year of grad school. And I was in the airport just typing away. And I was like, all right, if this is it. And then a couple months later, they reached out and invited me to send in a video for the second round of interviews. And then I was awarded with 9 other incredible applicants. And that is the money that I'm kind of using towards um, some of my IDC training, some of my sex certification, sex ed cert. And so it's been immensely helpful. It's provided me a platform to kind of do more advocacy and just helping more of the queer community around that. And absolutely right. The more that Hinge has been really amazing in trying to shift and be more inclusive of um, genders and sexual orientations and relationship styles. And I think that the more it's similar to sex ed, right? Like the more that we see ourselves in culture and media and dating apps, the more like the more we feel seen, the more we engage, the more
Yeah.
successful options and opportunities to connect that we'll have. And
Mhm.
so I'm really, really happy that they're doing that and spending as much
Yeah.
time and effort as they are.
That's incredible. And to your point, the more we see ourselves in these spaces, the more space it creates for us to heal the parts of ourselves that have been hidden or fragmented for fear of safety, right? Even like true physical self safety, mental health safety and all of that, but also these perceived threats that we kind of live in that hypervigilant even when it's not because of our humanness that does that.
Well, and it's an interesting juxtaposition to what's happening on a political level, on a state and federal level, with some of the bills that are being put into or like some of the proposed bills, the anti-gay or anti-trans, don't say gay. There's like over 200 bills just proposed in January that are so discriminatory and hurtful and hateful. And so on one side, we're really trying to create more space, like you said so beautifully, and then on the other hand, there are so many people. It's the power, it's the gatekeeping, it's the um, taking away consent over people's bodies. It all comes back to that. And um, so I think it's both really amazing and keeping it in mind with like the larger macro context of what's happening.
Yeah, and I was also going to share like I'm so glad you kind of took it here because it's like it's almost more important. Well, it's obviously very important for all of us to have have ourselves like in spaces and for,
Mhm.
people that have been oppressed and minority groups to be like, "Oh yeah, like now I can see myself on TV or I can see myself in
Yeah,
politics at this large level."
yeah,
But it's also just as important for people who have a limited mindset, who, you know, who have like deep racism at their like core beliefs and things like that, to also see everyone that makes them uncomfortable, that they are afraid of, right? That they do have hatred for whatever reason. And this is like maybe unpopular opinion, but the more we actually see what the truth is for these people, the more we can, it feels very polarizing and divisive because like social media and all of that, but it's also bringing everything to light to be like worked on. And the more you sort of like agitate something that's not working, eventually it does have to like blow up and get worse before it
Yeah.
gets better, which
Well,
is
and it's an
where we
opportunity
are
for
right
people.
now.
Exactly, exactly. It's an opportunity for people to, um, my hope is that when people start to confront or engage with things that make them uncomfortable, that instead of having a reactionary response, and we talk about this, and I think that in poly communities and learning how to communicate about certain things, or in therapy, couples therapy, whatever, um, how to regulate so that we can respond and not react. And within that, there's a lot of curiosity, there's a lot of self reflection and questioning of like, where are these feelings coming from? Where did this messaging come from? Um, what have I internalized and what have I been taught and told, versus questioning and making sure that like it's like a gut check. Like, do I actually agree with this, or am I only against it because I was told to be against it? And I think that constant like self questioning and curiosity is something I would hope more people are starting to. It's a muscle you have to work.
Yeah, and the only way to get there is by seeing things that,
Hmm.
have you have those questions and might be reactive first, but then eventually when like, all of this isn't going away, polyamory, non-binary, like all of these things that feel so like fringe for people becomes the norm, then we create conversation. Whereas when everything is in the dark, there's no conversation around it. But like it's like we're bringing all this to the table now. We're not going
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
So, mhm.
yeah. It kind of is. It goes. I'm bringing back a something from my IDC course, which is also coming up in my schooling. But it's the discomfort scale of where like things feel safe and comfortable. It's like a green zone, and then your yellow zone is where like, ooh, this is kind of sticky, and then the red zone is where like danger and sometimes trauma and pain happen. But if we can sit in this yellow zone for a bit longer and even push into this like red zone of, that's where growth happens, that's where change and transformation happens. And so like sitting in this discomfort, because if you're constantly in this green zone, you're never going to grow. The yellow zone is where you kind of grow, and that's where I try to hopefully place myself more often.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a beautiful thing for everyone listening to, I think, take with them. Like, that's a
Yeah,
really great tool, friends and lovers listening to the show.
yeah,
Really think about in your life, where are those yellow zones? And,
yeah.
how can you start to be more aware of when you're in them, when you're really
Hmm.
activated, knowing what your boundaries are? It's a great exercise to say, like, for some of us, as we were talking about earlier, it's work for us to know our
Yeah,
boundaries. I'm still doing that work. I'm about to be 38 years old next week, and
yeah.
it's like
Ooh,
realizing
happy
what I
early
actually want.
birthday.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to really sit with that and do that work, now that you've heard Shelby say it, where in your life are you in those yellow zones? Where can you identify that you are in the red to pull yourself back? Like, of course, it's okay to play there for a moment, but then
Sure.
you go back to green to regulate. And what are your
Hmm.
self soothing and healing practices in
What's
your
your
green,
aftercare?
right? What's your aftercare? So you can gear up and fill your cup and move back into yellow eventually. That's
Exactly.
the,
Well,
mm-hmm.
and what I love about it is that it's for difficult conversations with friends, for family, for lovers, for how you engage with, like, it can be applied to so many things, um and it can change, and it can like shorten, and it can extend, and I yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I love it too. I want to, I know we have to wrap it up soon. I'd love to know, with everything you're learning right now in your IDC, and and you can also bring some of the like mental health training that you're going through right now into this as well. But I'm curious for film and television because it
Sure.
ends up being such a teacher for most people.
Hmm.
Like it shapes
Yeah.
culture. Our entertainment really
Yeah.
does. There's no way around it at this point. What do you see possible when, maybe 5 years from now, there's someone like you on every set of every major network? Like, how does that change the
Mm.
landscape? What are you inspired
Oof.
by?
I love that you just asked this. I had so many like feelings in my body as you were saying this, because I spent a lot of time over the weekend reflecting, and over this past week too, what some of my biggest takeaways have been. And I'll touch on two and try to be brief with it. But the idea that right now what I'm being taught is how to advocate on set for actors and actresses. And one of the conversations was doing that requires a conversation, sometimes educating what actors and actresses, educating with the actors what their boundaries and consent, like what their boundaries are and what they are consenting to. And in light of that, also educating directors, crew and set members and production how to respect those boundaries. And my hope would be in the future is that the education process lessons and less, that everyone comes to set with a language, with a vocabulary, with an understanding, with these ingrained practices. Because right now there's such a like a yes thing, like yes I'll do this to further my career, yes I'll do this because I was socialized as a female and I want to seem agreeable and amenable and I want to not seem difficult. But what would it look like if our yeses and our boundaries were celebrated instead of if our yeses were celebrated and nos weren't didn't come with consequences? What would it look like
Mhm.
if yeses were great? Thank you for telling me that. How can we navigate and shift? And what would make you comfortable? Or boundaries are an opportunity. Look at seeing boundaries as a gift and a way of collaboration. Of saying, "Are you comfortable with this?" And me responding with, "No, but I am comfortable with this." And then we collaborate into this beautiful new version of what can be created. So that's kind of the first one, is that I'm hoping that it will lead to, we'll see more education up front and less education on set, which will,
Mm,
I think, mean that the culture is a culture of consent is starting for everyone and is being more ingrained initially. The other is accountability and how accountability is held for people. We we came across and watched this video by Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an incredible author advocate. They wrote, I'm sorry, Pleasure Activism, and
oh,
the yeah,
yeah.
the work that they do is really incredible. And there's a video that I believe they did with Barnard, but I'll send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. But um, it was about accountability and how we can't hold anyone accountable. All that we can do is provide the structures and the compassion and the space and time for them to take accountability themselves. And that as harm doers, sometimes people who do harm, when they inflict harm, it's not the first time that they've experienced harm. It's usually because harm has been done to them. And when we look at it in a microcosm, it's so easy to place blame. And so if you pull back and look at it as a bigger picture and make sure that all of their needs are being met, that like what happened to them first before we can change the conversation and transform. And Adrienne Marie Brown has this really beautiful they say that once accountability is available and transformation is held, then it's like a caterpillar to a butterfly. You can no longer crawl, you must fly. And I was like, oh my God, if people were able to recognize that we all inflict harm at some time and we've all been harmed. And so, how can we hold more compassion in those conversations and learn to engage with each other from that lens of accountability so that transformation is possible and more easily accessible to all? And so that's one of the things that I've been sitting with a lot as far as um, in both my IDC work and my um, mental health stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll send you the video. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, we'll definitely link it in the show notes. I realized that actually someone told me about them while I was in Asia and
Oh
earlier
yeah,
at the beginning of this year, and I actually ordered one of the books. I don't remember which
yeah.
one, and it's in a
There's
stack
two.
of
Yeah,
books that are here that got ordered when I was in Asia.
I
I
love
was
it. I
like
love it.
reading like crazy on vacation. But I'm really excited to dive into it. Pleasure activism is,
Mhm.
I feel like, in a lot of ways what we're all doing,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
I think when we talk about sexuality in such an open way, as whatever, like as queer women right here,
Yeah.
polyamorous, or we can go into like people who are non-binary or
Mhm.
whatever minority groups. It is activism to talk about
Absolutely.
pleasure
Yeah.
as someone who uh, you know is born into a society where pleasure is not for us, it's
Right.
for somebody else. And so it's
Right.
all like part of it. And I didn't even realize that until I was doing this show for like 6 months. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is like activism work, actually, and owning
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's what you're doing. And I want to hear so much more about that next time we get together.
Yay!
Yes, but thank you so much for your time
Uh,
and for coming on the show and sharing these expertise in these fields that really need a good upheaval. And it's great to highlight the companies that are already doing the work to move the line
yeah.
forward. Like you said, HBO, right? So that is
Mhm.
really cool. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
They do the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah. Well, and thank
um,
you too for creating a platform and highlighting people and companies that are doing the work, because I think that everyone accesses information differently and finds things differently or even says things in a different way. And so thank you for what you're
yeah, appreciate it, love. I can't wait to meet you in person.
doing. Yeah, me too. I can't
Yes.
wait. I need a trip to LA. I'm overdue.
Come on out here, girl. All right, my loves. Well, that is another incredible episode. Please don't forget to like and rate and review and let us know what you liked about this show. Make sure you tag Shelby and myself. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the reviews and I will answer them and feature them on the show. Don't forget to subscribe.